To get us rolling here, if you could just introduce yourself and share a little bit about your professional background, that'd be a great way to get started.
Sure, happy to. First of all, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Appreciate it. My name is Elle Bruno, and I am the managing director of the Techstars Boulder Accelerator. For those of you who are not familiar with Techstars, we are the largest investor in pre-seed companies in the world, and we invest via an accelerator model. So I make 24 investments a year into pre-seed seed companies, mostly in the fintech space. And prior to doing this, I've been with Techstars for 2.5 years. I was a founder operator for 17 years. So I've been a part of building 4 companies, 3 of those venture backed. And as I like to say, I've seen every sort of outcome possible in those roles.
Wow, that's really fascinating. Can you go a little bit deeper into what it means to be an investor at an accelerator? Because I think that there's a unique kind of intersection there around kind of training, development, support that maybe is not the norm for kind of a standard investor.
Yes, that is correct. It's a lot of work. So very much a roll up your sleeves type of investment role, in that what happens is we write small checks into 12 companies at a time, and then we put them through a 13-week, call it a boot camp for those of you unfamiliar with the term accelerator. And during those 13 weeks, we're very hands-on, weekly one-on-ones with all the companies. And in my program in particular, we teach them everything from customer discovery, go-to-market strategy, how to close sales, and then we move into fundraising towards the end of the program and support them in their what is generally their first institutional round of fundraising.
And so at some point in your career, you switched from operating inside of a business, and many of these being growth and technology businesses, to being an investor. What prompted that switch? Why did you think that that was going to be the right move for you? And yeah, maybe a little bit more insight into kind of what the thinking was there.
Sure. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of a very large exit back in 2014. I was the head of sales at a startup called Trunk Club in Chicago. We were acquired by Nordstrom. It was at the time the second largest e-commerce acquisition of all time, actually, and mostly employee owned. We'd only raised about $7 million. So a lot of people had great outcomes from that. And that was where I originally got my investing bug. I started angel investing in 2015, made about an investment a year, smaller checks, but only invested in female founded and co-founded businesses. And then I went on to be a part of 2 more startups on the operating side as of my full-time job, while angel investing on the side. And in 2019, my husband and I made a move to Denver for lifestyle reasons. And that's when I really decided I wanted to make that switch to full-time investing. And a couple of reasons I chose this path was having been an operator of 4, hyper-growth startups, I was ready for a little bit of a change. It was very exhilarating, yet exhausting. And I wanted to utilize all of that muscle I had built over those years being an operator. I'd seen so much, I had learned so much, everything it took for, a founding team to be excellent or not excellent. And there's just things you learn on the operating side that really can't be read in a book that are very valuable on the investing side. And I recognized that as I went on to be part of, teams that were fundraising and sit in board meetings. And I very much thought that my most valuable cap table members were the ones that had been former operators, and, realized there was a big opportunity for former operators to join investing. It's actually become very common in the last few years, but I will tell you, back in 2014, 2015, most venture capitalists had come from the finance side of things and not the operating side. And so to sum it up, it was a combination of having built a ton of muscle as an operator and knowing that that could be valuable, and not only choosing great companies, but supporting great companies. And then I will say kind of the final piece to that was supporting underrepresented founders. So as a female going out there and being a leader in startups and going through the fundraising process, I had experienced a ton of discrimination in that process. And I thought, how can I be most valuable to making change? And it was to sit on the other side of the table and be the one supporting those underrepresented founders and writing checks. So the combination of those 3 things really drew me to the investing side.
Yeah, that's a fascinating story. And also, it resonates for me when I did my kind of first loop around in fundraising in 2014, and one of our investors was called Founder Collective, and literally their pitch was, we were former operators, because it was such a unique thing at the time,
Totally.
9 years ago. So if you could take your role right now and kind of unpack it into its component parts, what are the major areas that are either the skills required to do the job well, but also kind of as a corollary, like what are the big things if you break down the job over the course of a week or a month or so, that are your areas of responsibility, areas of focus? Is it primarily picking teams and hearing pitches? Is it supporting existing investments? Like where do things land for you?
Yeah, it's quite cyclical actually. So currently I'm in program. So I'm wearing my operating hat, supporting my founders. I'll tell you, I had, 3 founder calls this morning with current companies in the cohort. My first call was about go-to market and acquisition. And my last call just now prior to this was about, what to go to market with as far as evaluation goes. So it really runs the gamut for supporting these founders on the operating side and advising them. So that's the hat I'm wearing today. When our companies graduate in April, I will be going back to wearing my investor hat and doing, hundreds of interviews for the next cohort and choosing that class and then so forth and so on and kind of rinse and repeat. So those are the 2 big hats I wear, like operating advisor and investor. And it depends on the time of year. And then, in perpetuity, I'm always having one-on-ones with founders that have been in previous classes. And it's, anything from, we're having a co-founder breakup to, can you introduce me to this VC to, how do I acquire customers? So kind of what I was talking about before, but that's, always in perpetuity with the alumni in the Techstars Boulder Accelerator.
Well, the latter is a question in perpetuity of how do I acquire. I guess there's at some point where companies start rolling down the hill, and that's product market fit, and then it's getting sucked out of you, and that's what we're all aiming for. But I think how do I acquire customers is a pretty common question until you hit that point. So when you think about the companies and the founders that you've worked with that are I don't even know if I want to say most successful in the traditional sense, because it might not be based on valuation. It might not be based on even a company outcome, but in your kind of like subjective measure of what you think success is, what are the qualities of those that seem to be most successful? What do you see in the kind of companies that you see as the outlier ones that tend to have whatever their version of success might be, even though they're all venture backed, so it's kind of similar probably.
Yeah, well, I'd say there are 2 different answers there. At the end of the day, I am an operator. There is IRR metrics that I am looking at. I'm sorry, I'm an investor. There are IRR metrics I'm looking at. And, that is kind of what my measure of success is in my role technically. But to your point, Jeremy, I think kind of what you were alluding to is that, the people that have the most success in program aren't necessarily the same as people who have the most success when it comes to returns. And I would say day to day, what I see as a measure of success in our program is the companies that have the aha moments in the hyper growth in program and find that product market fit. And we're really obsessive about that. We spend the first 5 weeks of program solely on customer discovery, and sometimes our founders are like, I want those introductions to investors. I want those, those come at the end, and that's very purposeful, because it's about actually building a product that people want that will make your fundraising come much easier later on. So I digress. It's the people that are willing to go through the process of the accelerator and really embrace it, that tend to come out with, the most positive outcomes. And we're in week 7 right now, week 8. And we're really starting to see that turn, and it's super exciting. Again, my last call I was just on, we just got 3 LOIs. We're about to sign a major partnership. We just signed on 750 new customers. We're actually starting to see the impact of this first 5 weeks of customer discovery and really building the infrastructure. And it's the founders, again, that get excited about it, that wrap their arms around it and say, okay, we're going to trust the process, that emerge from the accelerator most successful, quote unquote, right? So that's what I see for success in founders. And I feel like I've learned over the years doing this that, really look for founders who want to come in and want to learn and don't just want introductions to investors, because that ultimately comes.
I had a coach growing up that would just constantly repeat, you're going to get out what you put in, like over and over and over again. And I guess, it just remains true throughout life. Whatever you're working on, whatever you put in, you're going to get back out in some form or for another.
Totally. I think people are sick of me saying input equals output, and, also focus on the process, not the prize.
Yeah, I love that. Because it will result in the prize if you focus on the process.
Exactly.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So on a more kind of personal note for you personally, what is it that you love about the work that you do?
Yeah, I was just saying to someone the other day, I feel like I figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up finally at the, ripe old age of 42. Um, I've said this before on some other conversations or podcasts, but, I live vicariously through my founders in my program, and they have so much courage that I don't have, and so much curiosity. And, they're just so passionate about what they're building. I find so much joy and humility in being able to support them on those journeys and them letting me in to support them. I feel like it's an honor to do that. And every day, I'll wake up and I'll look at my calendar and I'll be a little exhausted looking at it, right? Oh, okay, I have 12 one-on-ones today. All right, you're going to do this. But it's like the second I walk into the first one, they're so passionate about what they're doing. You can't help but feel that as well. And kind of all of that anxiety of the busy day washes away. So I love supporting them. It's so cool. I've learned more in this job in, 2.5, 3 years than I think maybe in the entirety of my career.
What a wonderful answer from an investor. I mean, it's like a really high alignment with what you're doing every day. I always think it's funny whenever, I haven't talked to that many investors, more so operators, but I always think in the back of my mind it'd be a hilarious thing if an investor was just like money, like it's just the money and that's all it is. And that's obviously never the case. But I always find that, and not only is it not the case, it's almost the process and prize thing as well. It's like it's the reason that the way to be a really good investor is not necessarily to care about the prize, but actually the input and the process and the relationships and all the things you're describing. I think when you have
time will tell, right? We'll see in 8 years. But yeah, I mean, all different, all investors, have all different motivating factors. There's all sorts of us out there.
What I'm gonna switch gears and I'm gonna ask you the inverse of that question, not because I want to focus on the negative, but because I think it's sometimes interesting to kind of see what the downsides, the tough parts of certain roles are. So what is it that you most dislike or find challenging in kind of a negative way about the work that you do?
Just that I don't get to fully see through, what's happening with my companies, having 40 portfolio companies under my belt. It's not like I can dedicate the time to them that in the long term, that would be ideal for me, which is, not what traditional investors do either, but you're just so mentally invested in these companies. I wish I could spend more time with them, to be honest. And so, traditional funds call it 8 to 10 investments a year. They have a little more bandwidth or opportunity to do that, whereas I'm making 24 investments a year. So it's just, it's hard to be in it all the time. And I definitely find that challenging for me personally.
After a few years, that'll stack up. There's a lot of companies. Final question for you. Let's imagine at some point there's some young person, maybe a student that's out there and is inspired by your story and wants to do similar type work to the work that you're doing. Obviously, you took it seems like a lot of investors take very non-traditional paths to where they are. What would be your advice to that person who wants to follow in your career footsteps and kind of do similar type work to the work that you're doing today?
Put in the hard work.
Simple.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Put in the hard work. Things don't just get handed to you, especially if you're a woman or a person of color. You have to put in the hard work no matter what. And we'll bring it full circle, Jeremy. Then you trust the process, not the prize, right? So put your head down and do the hard work. I think there's not enough people doing that today.
Yeah, sure. And I think obviously, like I was going to follow on with that question with, specifically thinking about people that don't have a network or have even, a second or third degree connection to the world that we've been privileged to spend time in. But that is what Techstars is meant to be working on, is try to give an access point to people that is very merit-based, or at least that's my understanding of what Techstars is meant to do. So I do think that maybe is a path that people can think about as well. So
yeah,
Elle,
absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It was great to hear your story and a few thoughts on broadly being an investor. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.